and if she doesn't get those, she can't sit for any length of time. So she said she's supposed to go this week, and then she will be back next week. So please remember her in your prayers. Millie is last time I heard, they have not rescheduled her surgery for a particular date. They were just having to postpone it a little bit longer. So I don't have anything new as far as that's concerned. Is there anybody else? Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and have a prayer, and then we'll get started with our class. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the day, and we're thankful, Lord, for everything that you do for us. We ask, Lord, that you bless those who are traveling towards us this morning. Give them safety to service, and then take us home again safely. We ask, Lord, that you bless our class this morning and our worship. We continue to ask prayers for those who are sick, those who are having surgeries and procedures, and we ask, Lord, that you bless them. Bless those who are traveling and away from their families, and we ask that you give them safety and bring them back to us again. We also ask, Lord, that you bless those who are bereaved of loved ones, those who have lost loved ones recently. We pray, Lord, that you comfort them and strengthen them. We're thankful for so many things that you do for us. We're thankful for the word that you blessed us with, that we can understand you better and we can understand how to be more pleasing to you. We're thankful for the congregation here at Central. We ask, Lord, that you continue to bless it, continue to bless us with a zeal for the work. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, let's go to Isaiah chapter 3. Isaiah 3. This is yet another pronouncement of judgment on the nation. Judah and Jerusalem is who he's prophesying to here at this particular point. And he's pronouncing judgment, as he constantly does throughout the book. It's the idea that they are to suffer for their disobedience to God, for their turning away from Him, for their, as the Scriptures say, whoring after false gods. And here's yet another one. And I want you to look at this, because one of the biggest problems, I've read these studies about the effects of war and the effects of turmoil in a region, and there's always the obvious ones, right? There's always the obvious ones where there's destruction of property. If you look at pictures of Europe after World War II, after the big bombing raids by especially Germany, as they would come over and they would bomb France and excuse me, and England and all these nations, and they were just rubble. And it takes a while because you have displaced people and you have all of these problems, this turmoil that's going on. Then you have the other issues with turmoil. You've got displaced people. You've got families that have been torn apart. You don't know where people are. Where's my family? Where are my children? You've got people who are taken away separately. They did that when they rounded up people to send them to the camps. They would take, many times the families would not be kept together. You'd have all the men taken to one place, and you'd have all the women taken to another place. Then once they got there, they would divide them up between children and families. So you had families that were torn apart. Okay. Then you have the secondary problem of you have a drain on resources. So all of these things build up into issues that come along when you have this kind of conflict. Well, let's look at chapter 3 and see what some of the end results are for this turmoil that's going to be happening. It says, "For behold, the Lord of hosts," of course referring to Jehovah here, "takes away from Jerusalem and from Judah." Okay, so what is this in reference to? Well, when the Babylonians come and they carry away people into captivity, this is what's going to happen. Right? He's prophesying what's going to occur. Right? So what is going to happen? It's going to take away from Jerusalem and from Judah. The stock in the store, what is that? Stock in store? Stock, animals, right? Livestock. What's that? Okay. Everything. Because remember when, one of the things that the temple acted as was a repository for foodstuffs. That's where the priests that's where they kept their groceries, so to speak. They had a very large pantry. So when the Babylonians come in, they would take away all of these things that they had stored up for their own use. Okay, but they would also take away stock. not just livestock, but certainly that was a portion of it. You know, they came in and all of these herds and vast numbers of livestock, they would carry those away. That was spoils of war. They were entitled to those under, the terms of war. You know, if you conquer somebody, you get their stuff. You weren't going to leave it for them. You might leave something for them, but for the most part, you took away everything. You didn't care whether they starved or not. It was a matter of, it's mine now. Right? So, takes away from them the store, or the stock in the store, the whole supply of what? Bread. The staple of life. Right? Always been said. You got bread and water. If nothing else, you can subside on bread and water. But he's going to take what's going to happen is even that's going to be taken away from the very building block of life is going to be taken away from them. They're going to take away the whole supply of bread and the whole supply of water. Everything. Is water important in that part of the world? Man, it's very important. Not only does that mean that they were going to take away storage, I mean, you really don't have people carrying away large, things of water. It's difficult, it's bulky, it's all of those things. But what does it mean? They're going to claim ownership of the wells. Those wells that God gave them, that God directed them to, they're going to take them. And before, where you would be able to go and pull water up from your own well or from a communal well with you and your friends or your family, now you're going to have to ask permission to take water from your own well. That's what's going to happen. This is how devastating it's going to be. And you can be refused. They can say no. So what do they have to do? Now they have to go and find, you see these pictures of these third world countries where people are having to go and they're getting dirty water out of ditches. And they just kind of boil it if they can and filter it if they can, but they're having to drink nasty. That's what's going to happen. They're not even going to be able to get water from their own wells. They're going to have to go and find it in ditches or standing water in holes. That's how bad it is. So he's going to take away all of these. Also, not only is he going to take away the physical stuff, the necessary things for civilization, what else is he going to take away? Number 2, he's going to take away the mighty man and the man of war. Now, what does that mean as far as that's concerned? Well, what's that? Yeah. He's going to destroy them in war. He's going to kill them in war. That was part of it. When you've got two groups of people fighting, they didn't just sit there and let the Babylonians come in and take them. They fought them. But the Babylonians won. So that means what? Their army was defeated. So these young men, these men of fighting age, the best and the brightest, the hope of Israel, because remember, in the terms of the Jewish tradition, who were the important ones in the family? The men, the boys, right? Because they were the ones going to take care of mom and mom and dad in their old age. It was to the boys that the inheritance was divided. Now that was changed because eventually it got to the point they changed the law where girls could, if there were no boys, girls got the inheritance. But remember that was how it went. The boys, you wanted sons because they carried on. They were able to pass down the wealth. Well, all of those young men are gone. I read an article one time, and it said that it was especially during World War I, but World War II was almost as bad. In World War I, it was around 30 to 35% of young men between the ages of 19 and 20 and 35 were gone from Europe after World War I. You think about what a devastating thing that does to a society. I mean, they're gone. They're dead. They've been killed in battle. So not only is it the idea of the death taking away from them, but what that means for the future of Judah, what that means for the future of Jerusalem, when all these young men are taken out of action. Yeah, you lose generations down the line. I mean, you take away young men of marriageable age and able to sire children, and you look at what that does to the generational aspect of it. They're gone, and there's nothing that can be done about it. You can't bring them back. All right? But not only this, but not only were they killed in battle, but they were also carried away. Okay? If they were fighting and they were captured, they were taken away. They weren't left behind, because if they were left behind, they could defend Judah. They could try their best to drive out the Babylonians. They didn't want that. So they took them with them. and put them into service for the Babylonians. So all of these things are happening. So you can see this drain, slow drain out of all that Judah has to offer, all of the great hope that Judah has. All of this is slowly being pulled away. But he's not done. He said he's going to take away the mighty man and the man of war. He's going to take away the judge and the prophet. What does that do? It takes away civilization, right? The rule of law is important to a civilization, is it not? Well, when you pull away the prophet and the judge, the diviner and the elder, what does that do? There's nothing. What's that? Yeah, you think about what's left. There's anarchy. In the true sense of the word, there's no law. That's what anarchy is. There's no trying to think of the right word. Yeah, there's no sense of order. Yeah, there's no sense of order anymore. Yeah, it's chaos. One of the things that the judges did was when you had people who had issues with one another, they would bring it before the judge. Well, if there's no judge, what do you have? You have two people who neighbors who are against each other, and there's no peace between brethren anymore. Talk about the idea of the prophet. Well, it's hard to prophesy against people that aren't there anymore. That's been taken out. There's no more need for prophecy because there's no more nation. So it's looking bad. It's looking kind of grim for Judah, is it not? Yeah, it's pretty bad. And then he says, take away the captain of 50 and the honorable man, the counselor and the skillful artisan. Where are the artisans going? They're going to Babylon, right? Right? They're going to Babylon so that they can provide craftsmen for who? Nebuchadnezzar. And all of the things that he did. You wonder how much of the Babylonian those artifacts we see from Babylon, how many of those were fashioned by Israelites, the Jewish captives? How many of those things were furnished by them? They were pulled away. So here we see a little bit more of a drain. They're taking away everything that made their society, their civilization, what it was. That's sad. I don't want anybody to take anything away from this, but what was left behind? Small children, if the small children weren't killed, because the Babylonians didn't care. I mean, they killed children. That didn't bother them too much. Small children, old folks that were incapable of fighting, that just weren't capable of fighting, and a great many women. That's what was left behind. So what did they do? They left their own people behind. The Babylonians left their own people behind and carried off everybody that made the society what it was. They carried them away. Continuing on, the counselor and the skillful artisan, the expert enchanter. I will give children, in verse 4, I will give children to be their princes. The idea that, once again, that anybody of age is gone. So what's left behind? Small children, right? Who do they, now when they left people in charge. They left people on the throne. There were people on the throne of Judah, but what were they? Young people, young children. Okay? Not men of age, not men of experience or wisdom that could give guidance to the nation. It was people that they could control. That was how they operated. So they left Judah as a servant state, a client state of Babylon. We'll leave you intact, or not really intact. We'll leave you in tatters, but we will leave you. But we will control you from afar because we will install people that we want on the throne. We'll leave some semblance of order so that people won't question things too much. They won't be agitated too much. But in the end, we're going to control you. We've got control. It says, and babes shall rule over them. The people will be what? Oppressed. What is oppression? It's easy. We think about it, but is it easy to define? Yeah, kept down. Right? Yeah. It keeps you in a perpetual state of uncertainty, right? Really, what oppression does, it keeps you in a perpetual state of not knowing what's going to happen next. The idea that if you ever watch these movies where you've got a more powerful group, and they've finally taken over a less powerful group, and they impose their will on them. And then at every turn, it seems like they change the terms of the agreement, right? Well, we're going to take this much, and we're not going to take any more. And then they come back to him. Well, no, we're actually going to take a little bit more. We're actually going to take a little bit more. And they slowly but surely just sap everything out of them. Well, not only does it, once again, take away the physical things, but it takes away a will. And that's one of the most important things when it comes to a conquering nation, is sapping the will of the conquered nation to fight back. Leave them with no opportunity. Leave them with no hope. Leave them with no ability to change what's going on. You know, you've taken away their judges. You've taken away their young men that could fight in any way, shape, or form. You've taken away their food. You've given them no access to their wells unless they ask permission. You've taken away their. Basically, they've left them with very little left. Now, this is the thing. Compare and contrast that with what they were promised when they walked into the promised land. It was called promise for a reason. They were promised it. But remember, they said it was flowing with milk and honey. Now, what does that conjure up? Pretty delightful place, right? They're looking forward to this. What? Yeah. They had everything they needed and more. They had wells that they did not dig. They had houses that they did not build. They had vineyards and crops that they did not plant. They walked in and took what was someone else's. So now, compare and contrast that with what's happening with Babylon. They're coming in. They're taking wells that they did not dig. They're going to live in houses that they did not build. They're going to have crops and vineyards that they did not plant. So basically, God is showing them, God is demonstrating something to Judah. See, they were always on the conquering side, but now they're the conquerors. And they're realizing what it was like, what was happening to these people that they drove out before them. Now it's happening to them. Now they're seeing what happens when people disobey God. That's why God gave them the promised land, because the people that were living there were in disobedience. They were idolaters. That's why. So now they're experiencing something for the first time. They've never had this happen before. You know, I can imagine when the Assyrians came in and took out Israel, the northern kingdom, they heard about it, and boy, they were just like, oh, it's terrible. That's awful. I can't believe that. But they were others. They were the other tribe. They were separate. You know, they were kinsmen, but they were separated in a way that is hard for us to understand. I guess the closest thing would probably be the United States right around in the 1860s. You know, when you had the northern United States, and then you had the Confederate States. Yeah, we spoke the same language. We came from the same place, but there was something different about them as opposed to us. And that was kind of close to what they were experiencing. And I imagine when they heard they were carried away. Did you hear what happened? Oh, it was awful. And you know, they're gone, and we don't know what happened, and they've been carried away, and and how sad that was. But you know, it's not going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to us. Why? Because we have Jerusalem. God would never allow something to happen to His holy city. Were they right or wrong? They were as wrong as you can be, weren't they? I mean, that was their hope. That was why Judah stayed where Judah did. And that's why they thought that nothing could ever happen to them, because God would never allow destruction to happen to His holy city. They had no idea how wrong they were. When it came to chastising His people, He was willing to sacrifice His city. And He did. I mean, when they came in, they destroyed it. Well, I mean, you know, the idea that, you know, you look at it for what it was a beacon. It was just a shining light on a hill. But it had become a shining light for idolatry. You know, they were housing idols in the same temple as God. I mean, you know, God is essentially having to share. It's like those old, you've seen those old sitcoms where you've got the two roommates that are nothing alike, God couple, so to speak. You know, Here's God sharing his house with this rock image that's been placed there by his own people. I mean, it doesn't work out well. And that's what he's having to do. He's having to share his house, and he's having to share his people with an idol. It doesn't really exist. It only exists in their minds, but in their minds, they've put him on equal with God. So there's a problem, and that's why this has happened. That is in essence why this has happened. They would not heed the call to repent. They refused, time and time and time again. And this is what's occurred. The people will be oppressed. Everything that they had that made them special, he's rejected. He's rejected them from being his spouse, so to speak, as we've read in Amos. Okay? They have rejected him from where he was. And now he has rejected them from where they were. You will no longer be my bride. You'll no longer be my spouse. You can live in my house as slaves. After they came back, they felt that now they've been restored to God's good graces, but they hadn't. He still loved them. He still cared for them, but they were never the same to him after they were carried away into Babylonian captivity. This says, the people will be oppressed, everyone by another and everyone by his neighbor. The child will be insolent toward the elder. And what is he talking about here? It's a breakdown of social order is really what he's coming down to. This idea of the child will be insolent toward the elder, it's the things that they held dear to them, the idea, the concepts of their social order that they held dear are going to be upended. It's not going to be the same that it was before. The idea of the child being insolent toward the elder would have been unthinkable in that day and age. Matter of fact, there were provisions made for a young person who was insolent towards his parents and who cursed his parents. So he shall be put to death. That's how seriously God took that idea and that concept about how they were to behave towards one another. The old people were considered to be very, I wouldn't say sacred, but they held a very important position in society. And here it says that won't mean anything anymore. That idea is gone. The base toward the honorable. The lesser will be insolent towards that person who is an honorable person. Once again, the idea of social order being upended. And we don't think about that, of course we look at it today and we see that all the time, right? Go into today's schools and you'll see children being insolent towards their teachers and towards people in authority, and unfortunately that seems to be the case. It's not the rule. I'll say that. For the most part, kids are still, but that has become a problem in society, and you see the end result of it, don't you? Children who are insolent towards people who are in position of authority. You got jails full of young people who have been insolent and disrespectful of authority, and there they are because they don't respect authority. All right, so we see the problem with it. We even see the issues with it today. So you can imagine what it was like for the nation. You've got all you have in Judah anymore are older people and young children. What kind of society are you going to have? Not much of one. It's just not going to be. It's not going to function well. So here he's describing, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to occur. This is how bad it is. And you can imagine while they're listening to it, he's saying all these things before they occur. All right. So he's talking about all of these things. What do you think their opinion was? What do you think their attitude towards Isaiah at this particular point in time? Yeah. That would never happen here. That would never happen here. God would never allow that to occur. Or just rejecting him totally. He says he speaks from God, but how do we know he speaks from God? Well, God sent him. He's saying things that only God would know. But, he's a crackpot. He's a nut. And there's no reason in the world to listen to him. We've done quite well so far. Now, yes, we've lost a lot of land, and we're right now paying tribute to other nations. But other than that, we kind of got this. We got this down.
We have the same problem today as we as Christians try to blame God's word to the people who want to hear it. We try to tell them what's eventually going to happen. Oh, I don't believe that. I don't believe
God would never send people to hell.
Right.
You know, if He's a loving God, He would never do anything like that. Why would God allow destruction and so forth and so on? And yeah, you're right. It is a very real. That's a very real. I wouldn't say it's concern, but that's a real objection that's thrown up all the time when people talk to you. When you talk to people, absolutely. Look at what it says. And he says, this child is going to be insolent toward the elder. The base is going to be insolent towards the honorable. Now, when he says a base person, we're not talking about social strata. We're talking about a lowlife, a criminal, a thug, so to speak, in today's parlance. Someone who is just not to be regarded as a decent human being. That's when he talks about the base. You'll find, I believe, in a couple of the translations, when it talked about they brought false witnesses against Christ, they said they found base fellows, and that idea of base means someone who is really there's nothing to regard them as a decent human being. They're criminals, maybe, whatever that might be, liars, just bad people. They act badly, and these are the kind of people who are going to set themselves as someone who's honorable. They have no regard for the honor at all. So now look at this. How does that feed into the very next verse? When a man takes hold of his brother in the house of his father, saying, "You have clothing, you be our ruler." What's happened is you've given up any idea of having someone of decency and honor having the rule over. Remember, they carried away the elder. They carried away the judge. They carried away anyone who would be able to exercise authority in a good and decent fashion. Those people are gone. Those people are out of the picture. They're no longer there. So what's happened? You've got the pool of potential rulers and potential authority figures. It's been reduced to basically, if you got clothing on, if you have any kind of decent clothing on, you can be king. You know, that's how bad it's gotten. That's how bad things are. So we don't think about that. we don't think about that. But that's what's occurred with them. Anyone who had any kind of ability is gone. So what do we have? If you just look like somebody that could be a ruler, that's as good as anything else. Is it bad for Judah? It's going to be. It's going to be really bad. Let these ruins be under your power. In that day he will protest, saying, "I cannot cure your ills. For in my house is neither food nor clothing. Do not make me a ruler of the people. For Jerusalem stumbled and Judah is fallen, because their tongue," here it is, verse 8, "because their tongue and their doings are" what? Against the Lord. What does that mean? Their tongue and their doings are against the Lord. And all that we do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. Well, everything they're doing in word and deed are what? Against God. Against God. How long did they think they could last if everything that they were doing, all of their words and all of their actions were in opposition to God? How long can any nation last when all of their words and their deeds are against God?
The last time that happened was before.
Yeah. Well, let's just put it this way. Destruction comes to those who are in opposition to God. Always and forever. Destruction is their end result. And he says, Jerusalem is stumbled. Judah is fallen. That idea, I mean, that concept, I mean, we can look at that today. The idea of stumbling and falling. When we talk about the idea of stumbling, you can stumble but not fall. I mean, people do that. They get it, but they manage to right themselves. It says, Jerusalem is stumbled and Judah has fallen. So that the end result of that is what we're looking at. If they had stumbled, because they stumbled numerous times over their history. I mean, really their entire Jerusalem or Judah's entire history is a case of stumbling. Oftentimes, though, they didn't fall. But here's the case where they've gone so far, much like in the days of Noah, they had gone so far that God could no longer overlook it. Destruction was coming to them because they would not. All right? Their tongue and their doings, their words and their deeds are against the Lord to provoke the eyes of His glory. The look on their countenance witnesses against them. All right, the idea of the look on their countenance witnesses against them. What is he saying here? Somebody tell me what he's saying here. What's that?
Possibly they appeared arrogant. Or
Could be.
and so they appeared not at all.
Well, look at what you go back up to that concept, that idea. Because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of His glory. Now, the idea to provoke the eyes of His glory, when you think about the idea of the eyes of His glory, it's talking about the power that He is going to exercise, the power that He is going to demonstrate to the people. All right. When you think about the eyes of His glory, we see this in numerous times. We see this numerous times through Scripture. The idea his eyes burn. All right. The idea his eyes burn with anger. It means that when you look at somebody, can you tell if they're angry for the most part? When they're really angry, can you look at their eyes and you can tell this is somebody that really, there's a problem. This woman, she's upset. Okay, so you can see that in the eyes, can't you? Yeah. Okay. So here we're talking about the eyes of the Lord burning with anger, the eyes of His glory. This is a guy you can see that he's angry. Now they've never seen Him before. No man has seen God and lived. That concept of actually seeing God in his actual personage. But can we see God's anger even in Scripture today? Yeah, we can. Could the people see God's anger in the words that Isaiah is pouring out before them? Yes, if they were paying attention. Here's the problem: they weren't paying attention, or they discounted it. They heard the words, but I don't know if they were thinking, well, surely he's not that upset, or surely it's not gotten to that point. But here's Isaiah and several prophets before and after still talking about God's anger towards them. So when have you heard of people who can't tell social cues? They keep talking even though you can look at them and you can see that they're mad, but this guy keeps talking even though you can tell this guy's upset with it. That's exactly what's happening. They're continuing on with their actions even though they know that God is upset. Either aren't paying any attention or they're discounting God's anger. He surely isn't that angry with us. It's not gotten to that point yet. But that is what's happening. Everything He's saying is pointing towards it. There's not one time so far has Isaiah said, you know what, it's not that bad yet. He's saying, this is what's going to happen. You are this bad. You are doing what you're doing. And it is angering the Lord. And His eyes of glory, that idea, His power is going to show. And you think that Jerusalem cannot fall? You think that Judah cannot fall? God will deliver you over. Not only will He allow it, He will deliver you into the hands of the Babylonians. He'll give you over to them. He will sell you. He redeemed you and He's going to sell you. All right? But the idea, the look on their countenance witnesses against them. They're putting on a face of this, but they're really not. All right? When you look at how they're behaving, you can tell that they are exactly the way God is condemning them for. They're idolatrous. They're wicked. They do not regard sin. It says they declare their sin as Sodom. They do not hide it. I thought this was kind of interesting when they says they declare their sin as Sodom. What that means is, Sodom and Gomorrah had a reputation, right? You read the account of Sodom and Gomorrah. They had a reputation for sin. It wasn't just, it's a nation or it's a city, but and this goes on there. That was their reputation, was as a sinful country, as a sinful city-state. That was how they were known. Well, guess what? That's how Judah is known now. Who is it known by? The nations that surrounded them. They gave God's enemies an opportunity to glory and to crow about it. They laughed. They mocked them. They disregarded them. At one point, they may have disagreed wholly with their choice of ruler, their choice of God. They may have disagreed with Jehovah, but they feared and respected Judah because at the helm was Jehovah God. But now they don't even regard them anymore. They've become a laughingstock. Their sin is known, like Sodom's was. What happened to Sodom and Gomorrah? Utterly destroyed. God rained fire on it and utterly destroyed it, for there was nothing left to rebuild. Nothing left to rebuild. What do you think the end result for Judah is going to be? If their sin is like Sodom's, not necessarily counted the same, but the sin was so great, and that's what they were known for. They were known as an idolatrous nation. And if you look at it around, you'll find where there was idolatry, but they were consistent in their idolatry. But Judah's not even consistent. They're worshiping Jehovah and they're worshiping the Baals at the same time, in the same temple. At least if you went to the other nations, you had a temple and it was one God, and that's who they worshipped in that temple. But the temple in Jerusalem, they worship Jehovah and Baal and Ashtaroth and all of the other false gods of the nations surrounding them. This is what's going on. But they declare their sin as Sodom declared their sin. They were perversely proud of it, so to speak. They do not hide it. They're not even very good at covering it up. They don't even hide it. Woe to their soul. The idea of woe, we said this at the very beginning. He uses this word a great deal. Isaiah uses this word a great deal. Woe meaning what? Trouble. Trouble, 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 trouble. So woe to those who declare their sin as Sodom. Woe to those whose tongues and doings are against the Lord. Woe to those whose countenance witnesses against them. The end result of this is going to be trouble for Judah. Now, in verse right after this, it speaks to us even today. You know how many people have said, I don't understand why my life is so bad. I don't understand why I constantly have trouble. I don't understand why I'm in and out of jail. I don't understand why I'm drunk in the gutter every weekend. I'm not sure. I can't understand all of these things. Why is my life so bad? What's the next sentence after woe to their souls? They brought what?
Evil on themselves.
They brought evil on who?
Themselves.
At the end of the day, the nation of Judah cannot point to anyone else. Now, how do we regard that? How does that affect us? At the end of the day, if we find ourselves in the it says he's going to divide us to the right. He's going to take the sheep to the right and the goats to the left. All right, look at you guys. He's going to take the sheep to the right and the goats to the left, and we find ourselves in that big herd of goats. At the end of the day, who are we going to blame? No. We're going to blame everybody else in the world, right? I know, I agree. I'm just saying, no, what do? It was my father's fault. It was my mom. It was my spouse's fault. It was the government's fault. It was the church's fault. It's everybody's fault but mine. Everybody else is to blame but me. All I was trying to do is just live my life, and these folks just that's what Judah did. That's what Judah did. They kept passing the buck. Look at Adam. Remember? What happened? The Pharaoh's word. The woman did it. What did the woman do? The snake did it. That's what they did. They kept pushing that down. They kept kicking that can down the road. Eventually, that can's going to land in somebody's yard. But all that to say this. At the end of the day, what does it say? They've done what? They have brought evil upon themselves. No one else is to blame for this. At the very beginning, they brought this evil upon themselves. They brought it upon themselves when they decided they needed a king. They brought it upon themselves when they divided the kingdom because they could not get along with one another, and you had one brother pitted against another brother. They have brought this evil upon themselves when they disregarded my priests, when they took the proper men out of office and installed their own. They brought it upon themselves when they entered into covenants and contracts with other nations. They brought it upon themselves when they intermarried with the nations that surrounded them when I told them not to. I said, you marry from within your own kinsmen. You don't go into the other nations to find it. They brought it upon themselves when they would start bringing in the small idols, the little household idols. They brought it upon themselves. Every single time they disobeyed God's word, they brought that evil upon themselves. God was willing to separate them entirely from the nations that surrounded them, from the Gentiles. He said, I want you to be separate. Okay, bring that over to today. Who brings evil upon us? We do. We bring evil upon us. We bring sin upon us. Bad things can happen to us, yes. But do those bad things necessitate sin on our part? sometimes it does. When bad things happen to us, what do? We sometimes sink into sin and say, well, I really didn't have much of a choice. You know, it was too much for me to handle, and we start making excuses for ourselves, but at the end of the day, we bring evil upon ourselves. You know, just because something bad happens doesn't mean that it can turn into evil on our part. You know, but unfortunately, that's the case. They have brought evil upon themselves, which basically precludes, one of the things he's wanting to make sure, you know, he says this, one aspect of it we need to remember. When he says this, he's also saying that it's not me that's brought evil upon them. God is saying this. They brought the evil upon themselves. I didn't visit this evil on them. They're the ones that have fallen away. They're the ones that have strayed from me. I didn't bring this upon them. They brought this upon them. That's why they are where they are. Say to the righteous that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. That basically sums up when we bring evil upon ourselves, what are we going to do? We're going to reap it, right? We're going to eat the fruit of our doings. We have to live with the consequences of our actions. You know, when we do something foolish and take a life or damage someone's property or injure someone, who's going to go to jail for that? We are. If justice works, we are. We're going to be the ones who are we're going to reap the whirlwind, right? That's what's going to happen. So who's going to eat the fruit of the doings of the nation of Judah? They are. They got to have to accept the consequences. God's not going to allow them to skate by. And the thing about I wonder if this was going through their mind as they were being rounded up and carted away into a foreign land. If it really sunk in what has happened to them and why. I imagine probably there are a great many people who were wondering what happened. What's happened? Why are things happening? But I look at it this way. This is part of it. The people that were left behind to live their life, the people that were not carried away, were likely the very people who were least likely to offend God. I never thought about that until I started looking at the idea. The people that were left behind, the people that were allowed to remain, and they scratched out a living. There's no way around that. They scratched out a living. But the people who were left behind were the ones who were most likely to have remained faithful to God. He's always taken care of the widow and the orphan. Those were the ones that were left behind. Those were the ones that were not killed in battle. Those are the ones that weren't carted away into Babylon, into this foreign idolatrous country. They were left behind. For better or worse, at least for most part, they didn't die or have to be subjected in the way that those who were carried away were. All right, we're finished. Any questions about what we've talked about so far? All right.